Hi, I am Bob Williams. Welcome to my home and my life. Hi, I am Bob Williams. Welcome to my home and my life. I am who I love and the work I do. Today I live in Southwest DC with my wife, Helen. We met at work and have been married 30 years. I helped raise her daughter and got 2 grandkids as part of the bargain. I refer to myself and others as having little to no understandable speech. It is wordy but accurate. I have had cerebral palsy all my life. I am in a power wheelchair and use a speech-generating device. I can access words in 2 ways, one by spelling and the other by stringing these symbols together. It is an icon-based language called word strategy that was developed in the 80s and it is going extinct. There are huge barriers and discrimination that prevent many and I believe most from accessing the communication tools they need. It is often seen as a luxury and toy. It is a necessity just like this wheelchair is, which is why it must come to be recognized and afforded as a right. I was born in the late 1950s at a time when hundreds of thousands and more baby boomers like me were institutionalized by their parents, told by doctors and others to commit their sons and daughters, walk out, and never look back. They were denied an education and worse. I experienced then and continue to routinely experience disability bias and discrimination, but I have always escaped the most hideous forms and consequences of it. Through the love and hard work of my parents, brothers and sisters, teachers, myself and others as well as privilege and sheer luck, I escaped all of it. My parents raised me in the same rough and tumble world of love as my 4 older brothers and sisters. At 6 or 7, I learned to type on an IBM electric typewriter. Absent this, my life would be far different. Later when I was around 13, my camp counselor painted the alphabet in bold black capital letters on a piece of wood. I pointed to the letters to spell out words and sentences. A year or 2 later, I started using a green board with letters, numbers, words, and phrases. It was called the Hall Row Communication Board, named after a writer with cerebral palsy who helped design it in the 1920s. It was so simple yet transformative. That board saw me through high school, college, and my first 2 full-time jobs. When I was very young, I spent a few years going in and out of what was then called a hospital for crippled children, where I was operated on, received therapy, and went to school. Town officials told my parents it would pay for me to receive a couple of hours of tutoring, but it would never permit me to go to the same school my siblings attended. My parents, B and Bill Williams, who grew up as orphans during the Great Depression, would have none of it, so they packed up the 5 of us, left the house my dad built, and moved us clear across the state just to give me a fair shot at getting an education. For the first few years, I was bounced around from one school to another, along with 4 to 7 other disabled kids who were consigned to what was called the special class. We became good friends. I and my parents pestered school officials and others to finally so-called mainstream me into all regular classes from 8th to 12th grade. And, as a teenager, I hung out with disabled young people slightly older than me. Life was far from perfect, accessible, or easy, but we did a lot together, Some of us also helped to create a statewide coalition of people with disabilities in Connecticut. I later got my degree at George Washington University. That time was one of the best in my life. I had a blast going to classes, living with friends, getting involved on campus and interning in the Senate, doing the same things those around me did, feeling and knowing others felt I belonged. My career is hard to encapsulate. I would just say I have tried to advance the rights, opportunities, and supports for children, working age persons and older adults with significant disabilities over 40 years by creating community living services in D.C., helping to pass the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, and administering the federally funded Developmental Disabilities and Independent Living Networks. It is a mouthful and I am proud of it. The first time I saw the insides of an institution was in 1979. That summer I interned with a lawyer who was suing the state of Connecticut to move people out of the so-called Mansfield Training School, the very place my parents were told to put me and drive away. I wanted to flee as I entered its wards, but I was awestruck by the people lying on steel gray mats on the floor because in their eyes I saw a mirrored image of what my life could have been. Soon after I returned to GW that fall, a friend took me to Forest Haven, the District of Columbia institution for people with actual and alleged intellectual and developmental disabilities. I say this because over the years many were sent there with little to no reason. Soon I was named to a community advisory committee to oversee its closing based on a class action brought by Harold and Betty Evans and several other black parents whose sons and daughters lived there. After college I went to work at the DCR. I was part of its team that was charged with monitoring and reporting back to the court on living conditions at Forest Haven and how the district was making progress in moving people into homes and apartments. In doing this I came to know Viola Washington, one of the greatest teachers I have ever had. She and I worked to get a communication system that would work for her. Sadly, like many others, however, Viola died without getting the support she needed to effectively communicate. It is among my greatest regrets and is vital to what drives me. Since I first monitored Forest Haven in the 80s, I have done extensive research to piece together and tell the story of why the place came to be, and most importantly to bring the stories of the children and adults who lived there to the light of day. Their stories serve as a powerful affirmation of just how resilient and resistant people must be to escape injustice and the enormous debt we owe to them for doing so. It is imperative we learn this history, both to disrupt its corrosive effects and learn about and honor what those who were once exiled there do every day to reclaim and take charge of their lives. Since the 70s, I have tried to advance the rights, opportunities, and supports for children, working age persons and older adults with significant disabilities. I have been everything from being an intern on the Hill to an advisor to Donna Shalala, when she was the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and to Judy Heumann, when she headed the D.C. Department on Disability Services. I loved it all, and I view co-founding and leading Communication First as the capstone of my life and career. It is work I must do. Months before the pandemic hit, we created Communication First, the only national human and civil rights organization led by and to advance the rights of the estimated 5 million in the United States who cannot rely on speech alone to be understood. Instead, we must rely on multiple means of augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC for short. We work to ensure every child, woman, and man who needs AAC have the tools and support they need to effectively communicate. The promise of the ADA is that we will live as equals in our community. But community is far more than a location, it is a way of life. A way of being able to communicate, connect, and find a shared sense of respect, understanding, and belonging. This video is a series of snapshots of not just my life but the lives of others with significant disabilities and the times in which we have found ourselves in, as well as how we have helped shape them for the better. And that, as Dr. King said, continue to be caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. Beginning in the late 70s, I joined with many in enabling people who both the federal government and district exiled to Forest Haven, a warehouse for those long stamped as, quote, the feeble-minded menace, to begin new lives. What I learned from the people I came to know and loved there are the best and worst sides of humanity. The strength and beauty of resilience and dignity despite all odds. And the constancy and compounding effects of systemic racism, ableism, speechism, and hate. We at Communication First do our work because we know that the vast majority of the children, youth, women, and men who need to use the same array of tools and support I use to express myself and live life are still being denied effective access to them. And consequently denied a good education, institutionalized and isolated in our community, and worse. People of color who need these tools are among the most likely to be denied them. Why is this still happening in 2024? It is still happening because the same deep bigotry and oppression still soils much of our society, public policy, and, frankly, our humanity. Communication First works to eradicate this base injustice, and we welcome all others to join us in doing so.